welcome. Welcome everybody. How are you doing today? It's so very nice to have you here and Happy New Year again. And today I wanted to speak a little more about our upcoming 3-week program, Fire Within, how to make presence a priority in today's world. Presence, our true nature, is already here. It is not something that is going to happen in the future. So we don't have to wait for that. We can simply give it our attention right now in this moment. Or at any moment, really. We can give it our attention at any moment. Whatever we give our attention to is going to grow in our life. And that's the fire of truth. The fire of truth is what fuels our desire to know who we really are. Fire of truth is what takes our attention towards our true nature. Fire of truth is what burns through the illusion of the mind so that we can even more clearly see who we really are. And not just see, but to really abide in our true nature. Giving it our attention at any time, it's really possible because truly there are no special circumstances that are needed for that. So that means moment by moment by moment. No matter where you are, no matter what is going on, we can find that moment, that time to give it our attention. However, I also want to encourage you to create times in your life where you don't have a plan. Our lives are busy. You know how that is. All our lives are busy. We always have plans and always want to do things. So to have periods of time when we don't have a plan, and not just that, because if we don't have a plan, then before we know, we get busy with other things, right? To not have a plan and to give it attention to our true nature. And that's really what meditation is, right? Meditation is really that resting in our true nature, that simple, natural abidance in who we really are already. And yet sometimes, even when we sit for meditation, we have a plan. We want to accomplish this and we want to reach that and we want to find this, and we want to learn to abandon that plan. That's why I encourage, especially if meditation is new to you, I encourage you to just have this open time in your life where more naturally, your attention can come to rest here. I also want to speak in this intensive a little more about relating from presence or relationships, because being in a world means being relational. No matter what, the moment we engage with the world, that is some type of relationship. And we could also even say already, just being in the body, just being born in the body, that's already relational, right? And we know that relationships can quickly turn complex, There's so much I would like to say about this, maybe not in this video, but there's so many things that come to play, our past and our relational past and everybody else's past, and and what's happening in this moment, right? So the complexity of it sometimes, it can be very, very complex. And especially, around holidays, around times when we meet with family and friends, I'm sure you might have noticed, I have noticed in my life, a little more intensity when it comes to being relational, around holidays, around family, around meeting with friends. And how can we, first of all, realize that relating is an extension? It can be. Being in a world, relating can become an extension of our true nature. And how can that be? How can we take what we know already, what we are learning about presence, about being here, about our true nature, how can we take that and apply that to being relational? How can we find that place in which we can truly come to rest? And also understand that there's a complexity in relating. There's certain things that have to be addressed. There's certain things that have to be spoken about. I often say, the biggest misunderstanding is that, or maybe, two misunderstandings, but the first is, we really need inquiry in order to truly be relational. But we also need to communicate once we have done our inquiry. That's often where relationships fail. We just do our inquiry, but then we also need to communicate. We need to learn to come into relating from a different place. We could call it a conscious relating, or presence relating, or present being present. Because that is so important in being relational. So as you see, there are a lot of things we want to touch on in these 3 weeks. And I am looking forward to having you in the program. I'm looking forward to connecting with you on the call, where we can actually speak, where you can ask questions, where I can address your concerns. And also, if you like these videos, if you benefit from them, please like and share and subscribe. And comment. We really appreciate your comments. It really helps us also to make this more visible. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of you in this new year.